Last week, I talked with you about the inspiring democracy protests in which I had the pleasure of participating in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv during my sabbatical last month. What I did not tell you is that the demonstrations in Jerusalem differ significantly from those in Tel Aviv. For one thing, they're smaller, more intimate. Tel Aviv is the largest city in Israel, indeed on the list of largest cities of the world. Its bustling urban center and sprawling suburbs inhabited primarily by secular Israelis. If Tel Aviv were in the U.S., we might call it a blue state. Most residents of that sprawling metropolis, even those who voted for the current government, fear that their way of life, not to mention the economic miracle of Startup Nation, will be lost if the judicial overhaul stands. Jerusalem, by contrast, is quieter, more religious. Still, Jerusalem too is diverse. The organization that coordinates the Jerusalem protests calls itself Shomrim al Habayit HaMeshutaf, Guardians of the Shared Home. While most attendees at Saturday night protests outside the president's residence are secular, one does see kippot and Orthodox women's attire. Organizers wish there were more religious Jews and more Israeli Palestinians in the crowd, as they seek to establish a big tent that reflects the diversity of Jerusalem. I'd been struck when I attended a protest for the first time in February that Israelis speaking Hebrew refer to the demonstrations as taking place on Shabbat. In that winter month, the event began after dark, what one would call Motzei Shabbat, after Shabbat goes out. I asked an Israeli friend who explained, that's just how Israelis talk these days. The word Shabbat now just means Saturday to most people. Not so in Jerusalem. The protest is explicitly on Motzei Shabbat, after Shabbat concludes. Throughout the country, the Israeli Reform Movement holds Havdalah services as these demonstrations begin. Even though the Tel Aviv crowds are exponentially larger, more people participate in the Havdalah rituals in Jerusalem, and they scrupulously begin after dark. On my first Friday morning in Israel this summer, my teacher, Malila Helner Eshed, explained, "An activist," she said, "needs Shabbat to stay sane." What is it that activists need and can take from Shabbat? The same might be asked for any of us. Whether we are engaged in protests to change the world, recovering from a busy and perhaps overwhelming week of work, whether it's remunerative or volunteer work, we need a break from our studies, seek respite in the midst of family responsibilities, desire spiritual solicitude at a time of illness or loss, or need relief from drudgery and boredom. The answer may be in the mystery of Shabbat. I often ask students, what is a year? They usually answer 365 days, but I didn't ask how long a year is. I asked what it is. Of course, the answer is a complete revolution of the earth around the sun, or a complete cycle of seasons. A month, similarly, is the time it takes the moon to go around the earth, or a complete moon cycle. And a day is the time that it takes the earth to rotate on its axis, evening, sunset to sunset. But what is a week? No natural phenomenon defines it. While the 7-day week is virtually universal, and historians of the ancient world have theories about its origins, it is ultimately mysterious. For Jews, it is a time period decreed by God from one Shabbat to the next. Another mystery is that in the Ten Commandments, as articulated in Exodus, we are commanded Zachor, to remember Shabbat. In Deuteronomy, the same phrase begins with a different verb, Shamor, to observe Shabbat. Why two different words? That's a mystery. And the sages resolve it with a miracle, making it more mysterious. When we sing Lecha Dodi, we include the phrase Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad, expressing the notion that God spoke the words Shamor and Zachor, remember and observe, simultaneously, as if in one word, in a way that no human can. My teacher, Melila Hellner Eshed, is a widely published scholar of mysticism and Zohar at Hebrew University. I could call her, appropriately, Dr. Hellner Eshed, but she invites us all to refer to her by her first name. I am nobody's idea of a mystic, and I typically don't understand Jewish mysticism. Still, I cherish the opportunity to study with Melila, who inspires me with mysticism in a way that I'm unbothered by my inability to understand or explain it rationally. I hope you are too, at least tonight. In medieval and early modern Europe, the mystics famously did battle with mitnagdim, rabbis who opposed mysticism and remained focused on every jot and tittle of Jewish law. Still, the mystics don't reject faithful Jewish observance. They cherished the rituals of Shabbat not merely for its own sake, but primarily for the elevation of the spirit they could bring. Just as Shamor and Zachor are two words inconceivably uttered in one voice, so Melila teaches are God and Shabbat one. Israel, the Jewish people, and God can also be one, but only if we observe Shabbat. And in the words of Isaiah, only if we call Shabbat oneg, call Shabbat a delight. Oneness is a critical concept in Judaism. We know that from the Shema when we declare that God is one. Melila, though, asks us to see the Shema as a prayer that God may become one. If I understand Melila's teaching, and I may not, being no mystic, but I'm trying, she wants us to embrace the notion that on Shabbat, the Shekhinah, God's indwelling presence, is eager for unity with Adonai, God's transcendent power. But the Shekhinah needs our help, and Shabbat's help too. The Jewish people must unite with Shabbat to become one. One Shabbat plus one Jewish people become one holy, united entity. Then on Shabbat, the transcendent and indwelling presence aspects of God can unite to become one. The magical mystery of Shabbat enables one Shekhinah and one transcendent Adonai to become one God. 1 plus 1 equals 1. On Yom Kippur, we will read words from Isaiah, castigating the people for observing rituals while mistreating the poor and vulnerable in their midst. The prophet continues, if you refrain from trampling Shabbat, from engaging in your exploitative affairs on my holy day, and will call Shabbat oneg, a delight, you will sanctify Adonai who is honored. And if you honor it and do not go to your corrupt ways, then you will delight yourselves in Adonai. Melila emphasizes that the prophet teaches that when we call Shabbat a delight, a process that involves more than naming, but deriving joy from our observance, then tit aneg, we delight ourselves, bring ourselves joy, a reflexive verb based on the same root as oneg. The Talmud expounds, one who delights in Shabbat is given an infinitely expansive heritage. For it is written, then you will delight yourself in Adonai. I will place you at the world's greatest heights, and I will feed you with your ancestral tradition. 1 plus 1 does not, of course, equal 1, at least not in the math books. But religion is neither math nor science. Our tradition has blessed us with rabbis who have instructed us in the logical benefits of observing Shabbat. We are doubly blessed, though, that we are also heirs of the mystics, of sages who imagined that God could utter two words as if one. The mysteries of the universe and of our lives do defy rational explanation. Malila is but one contemporary teacher whose religious creativity offers us the opportunity to contemplate that we, by uniting with Shabbat, may upend even mathematics. One Shabbat plus one people of Israel, however diverse, come together to make one blessing. And God, called by many names, representing countless attributes, who becomes one on this magical, mystical, holy day, delighting our lives every week. On Shabbat, we can make 1 + 1 = 1. Amen.